Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
What's up, y'all?
How's it going, everybody?
You guys got to work on it. I will say the y'all is better than the, what'd you say? Hello, everybody.
I'm workshopping some stuff. I couldn't come up with anything, though.
Okay.
I think Mike gets 3 points.
When does the focus group meet again? Is that this Wednesday?
I couldn't hear. Too many people laughing.
Too many people laughing. Well, amongst the three of us, too many people are laughing. Amongst the listeners, who knows? Let's see here. I will say, if you are listening live, you can ask your questions in the chat. Just the comment section of the video there. Just click on that little comment button, and you can ask your comments. You can see other people's comments, and even see some responses from us as we go through. I want to say today's show, like the last 3,476 shows over the past 15, 16 years, is sponsored by our good friend John Blickman at Blickman Engineering. You can check them out at blickmanengineering.com, and they have everything from your sturdy, more basic, bowls and pots and homebrew equipment up to, commercial gear. In fact, one of the new cool piece of commercial gear they make is this tall boy fermenter, which is 3.5 barrels. And it is made narrow enough to go through a doorway, a 36-inch doorway. So it makes it easy. A lot of times when you're setting up a new brewery, you don't have a lot of options for buildings and things like that. And it's cool taproom space, but not a great brewery space. Fermenter like this, you can shoehorn in to a lot of tight little spaces. So it's made a little skinnier, a little taller, which means you can get more of them into a space. All the outlets and stuff are on the front, so you don't have to. You can tuck them in real tight to the wall, maximize your space. I tell everybody this when they're opening a new brewery: you pay for, every inch of floor space in the building. The vertical space is free, so they don't write leases by cubic feet. They write it by square feet. So skinnier, taller fermenters are a godsend to brewers. So check them out. Tall boy fermenter, like everything Blickman makes. He puts his word behind everything, and they are quality goods. So check them out if you're into that, or you're a home brewer who's brewing just slightly over the allowed 200 gallons a year. Yes. So blickmanengineering.com. All right. How are you guys doing? Doing all right? Travis, you've been doing some traveling.
For work. Yeah. Utah, beautiful Utah.
You get any good beers in Utah?
So they're really good at making small beer, as you might imagine, because they don't have to make exclusively small beer, but you find small beers on tap, and they have guest taps like from Oscar Blues and Stone and stuff. And the local guys, I think, are blowing them out the water. Oh yeah, that's all they can do.
Because they go up to 4% ABV. It's 3.2 by weight, and you can do a lot with 4% ABV. And in Utah, they do miraculous things with it. I think the rule is, although they've been changing the laws, if you want to sell it on draft, no higher than 4% ABV.
I think they go just a touch higher there. I don't know something.
If you want to, at least this is the way it used to be. If you want to brew something stronger than that, what you have to do is bottle it, sell it to the government store, then they sell it back to you, and then you can sell it to your customers.
Wonderful business model.
Governments.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? But yeah, just some of the most amazing beers out there. Who was it? What's her name? Jennifer Talley at, what was the place? She just fantastic brewer. And I tell you, some of those beers, just amazing. I'm a huge fan of lower ABV beers. I love going to England, enjoying all the low ABV beers there. So, getting them in Utah, fantastic. Did you have a chance to? Of course, you had time to go. I know you. You weren't working; you were drinking.
There's a pizza joint in town.
Yeah,
and I get exclusively the taps. I'm trying to get all the local beer I can, but their bottle selection would rival almost any place in the country. I mean,
what's the name of that place?
It's a pizza place. I'll get the name to you later.
A pizza place. Google a pizza place. I'm sure you'll find it.
There you go.
And they have like 15% stouts in the bottles, and they have Belgians and Germans, you name it, bottles. Yes, excellent.
The first place I had Spaten Optimator was in Utah.
Really?
So the software I was developing, the users created their own user conference. It was an alternative to the big high money one that Macromedia always did. And I think the first couple of years was in Utah at Snowbird. Is that the name of it? It's a ski resort, famous ski resort in Utah. And so I remember in there, went to the bar, and they had like Spaten Optimator and a couple other things. So I'm like, I'll have that. And he goes, well, like, you have to be a member of the club or something. You had to be like a resort member. So it cost you $1. And then you were part of the membership. And then you could buy all the high alcohol stuff you wanted. So I got myself pretty hammered on some Optimator back then. It was a lot of fun. How about you, Michael? You doing any traveling? Getting out?
Trying to think of the last time we did a show. That was last May. Not too much, just
working.
Yeah, I've been getting actually heavy. I've been the process engineer out at the wastewater, our regional wastewater plant. So I've been really getting into the deep dive on some of that stuff to help them out. So it's been exciting, I guess, from an engineer's perspective. So yeah, what a nerd. But
all right,
no.
Let's jump right into some questions here. And reminder, if you're listening live, just go to the Facebook page, go to find our video where we're live, click on the comment section, comment there away with your questions or, whatever comments you have, and we'll see those. And if we can, we'll answer them for you live. Let's see here. Brendan, he says, I'm repitching yeast from a slurry that was harvested over 2 weeks ago. What is the best way to ensure I'm pitching enough healthy yeast? For example, if I need 400 billion cells for fermentation, should I, 1, take 100 billion cells from my slurry and do a larger starter, a 3.75 liter starter, or number 2, take 300 billion cells from my slurry and do a smaller starter, 1 liter? Thanks, Brendan. See, this is really good job with the question there, Brendan. Nice and clear and nice and succinct. Bulleted points. Gave me options, 1 or 2.
Yeah. Multiple choice.
What say ye, guys? Which one would you pick, Michael?
Well, based on the age, I would think he'd be fine doing the bigger starter the smaller starter with more cells.
Mm-hmm.
I just think 2 weeks, you should still be pretty viable. I was curious how he's measuring 300 versus 100. Is he just doing it by weight, or is he kind of just estimating?
Probably
I would say
the Mr. Multi pitching rate calculator, which gives you an idea of mills to use.
The only thing I said is, for me, I don't usually do starters less than 2 liters. And that's for a $200 billion cell, $200 billion.
He works in government stuff. That's why he's throwing around $200 billion.
I guess no, but yeah, I wouldn't make a starter that little. So just because I from what I've read and experienced, it doesn't really do a whole lot. I guess
Right.
Maybe just revitalizing, I guess, is what you would do.
Yeah, too small a starter could be an issue. What about you, Travis?
That's what I was thinking. I would go for the larger starter personally. For one, I use your calculator a whole lot when I got a lot of notes, and I don't feel like a partial growth up. I mean, going from 300 to 400 that's not even a full growth up. And just brewing beer, should you actually be able to get all your yeast back, you're going to get about 4x from that. So with a starter, you should easily be able to get right at 4x. And so that's much more controllable to me. And that's why I would go for that, not try to put a little bit of word in there and kind of wake it up. I mean, I do that on brew day, but I don't do that as a starter. Personally.
So I see that. It's interesting. You both have logical reasons why you would go with one over the other.
And we're wrong.
Yeah. And, 2 weeks old, still pretty young. Depends on what yeast it is. Some yeast dies out really quick in storage. Some yeast, lasts almost forever. So it'll depend on the strain. But I would maybe throw out, a third option, which is, so he needs 400 billion. I would take, 400, the 400 billion using the pitching rate calculator. And I would just, wake it up that day, like Travis was mentioning. I'd put it in a liter or whatever and just get it going, or however much I wanted to throw into my beer, depending on the volume of beer. And I imagine, it would get active pretty good if it's only 2 weeks old. So that'd probably be the way I would do it. 2 weeks out, like Michael was saying, like Travis was saying, day of, I'd start it, in the morning, or even a little later in the day if it was not too old, because it'll crack off pretty quick. So yeah, good question, Brendan. I'm sure we got to that. That was a 2014 question, but hey, we are on top of the new questions. We're getting into them very quickly, and it's staying up on, which is what we'll do after a real quick break. We'll be back right after this.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on two gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. Let's see. Matthew was asking, I've heard sour gut projects protects against oxidation later in the beer life. What is the mechanism compound with the sour gut that does this, and can we replicate this without making sour gut?
I'd have to do some Google search to catch up on that.
I've never even heard of sour goot. Sorry.
It's a supply of soured wort that is used to sour beer. Non-alcoholic fermented barley malt extract that can be used to adjust the pH of mash and wort during beer production. It is a natural ingredient that can be used by German brewing purists. It can also help extract zinc from the malt, which is a nutrient for yeast and helps with the beer's body and foam. It's topped up with fresh wort each time some is used to sour a beer. Fresh wort is soured by the lactobacillus in the remaining wort.
Based off of that.
Kind of like a sourdough starter, except for sour beer.
I guess in my show prep, I was listening to for the low DO stuff. I was listening to the podcast where you guys interviewed Charlie Bamforth, and he was talking about oxidation in the brew house and oxidation of packaged beer and whatnot. And I mean, we can get into it more, but for me, it made a lot of sense that you focus on the two biggest contributors to oxidation and staling in beer, and that's packaged DO and temperature. And then everything else, I mean, if you end up with any reason that's not good enough, then you can look at other things like this. So
there are some other staling compounds and thermal load and all that has an impact as well. Because there is staling, non-oxygen staling as well to worry about. So Matthew's saying it's the Reinheitsgebot way of achieving a lower mash pH. Acid malt is too, which is what probably most people do, but certainly you could do it that way. And I might be even a better way of. So if you're adding it in the mash, is the theory, Matthew, that adding in the mash protects against oxidation later in beer life?
I think he's saying you added. So I have a theory based on a very old brew strong, where I believe you told me that lactobacillus decreased the color of oxidized wort.
Brett, Brettanomyces, well, yeah.
So perhaps there's Brett in sour goods as well.
Right. If even I would imagine anything that can, consume any oxidized sugar would result in that kind of behavior, and would also, and I would think anything that has aerobic needs would in a way protect a packaged beer from oxidation, would help with staling, because it's going to consume some of that oxygen that you might be worried about.
I was going to throw another thing in there too. In that same podcast with Danforth, he mentioned about, after brew day, a good healthy fermentation goes a long way to cleaning up those precursors for staling and oxidation. So absolutely. Yeah. That's healthy, rich.
So Matthew is saying it's added to the mash, and I've read that it protects against oxidation, end quote. I haven't investigated if it's hot side or cold side protection. I don't think it would do anything as far as that goes. You're adding it to the mash, which is, going to be in the, 150 to, 160 range Fahrenheit, and kill off many of the bacteria and things like that. Won't kill off everything, but it'll kill off quite a bit. And then if not that, in the boil, it's going to kill that off. So I don't know where that's written, but I would take that with a huge grain of salt. For me, I don't know if that's true. Here's another tricky one. Now, God bless Clint. He wrote in, and he gave me the specific episode. He did not give me a timestamp in there, so I had to listen to the whole episode of myself talking, which is not my favorite thing to do. He says, "Hi there. I just finished listening to Brew Strong Yeast Esters, October 10th, 2016 episode. I was wondering if you are having any updates on the amino acids experiment you were talking about doing at the AHA rally at Heretic. I am very interested to hear if you had any findings on this. If you could get back to me in regards to this, whether you quote this episode, you might have mentioned results on, or actually have a written review on this would be great. Cheers, Clint." And then Chris, he wrote, "Hi, Brew Strong. Slowly catching up with the podcast on my drive to work. And I've recently listened to your episode around yeast esters and where you have mentioned an experiment looking at flavors generated from various amino acids. Have you completed this experiment? And if so, can you say what you found? Big fan of the show, Chris. Well, Clint and Chris, the interesting thing is, I think John Palmer said that he would do some experiments. And I pretty much went, oh, yeah, all right, that sounds great. This is, I think I came up with the idea of doing some experiments. And John's like, that's a great idea. Well, I'll do that. So I emailed John just recently after listening to the show and said, hey, we said we would do this. How about, I said, come up with a list of amino acids and, I'll run some tests. Or I'm thinking, I'll get Travis and Michael to run some tests. And I didn't wait for John to respond. I started looking at what amino acids I could get in pure form from Amazon. And I found quite a few. Let's see here. I found valine, glutamine, tryptophan, and phenylalanine, which it's quite interesting. I also found a paper, amino acid permeases and their influence on flavor compounds in beer. It is from Brewing Science, October 2014, volume 67, page 120. I clearly was able to get it from the internet, and so should you. It's fascinating reading, and it talks about the flavors that are created by these compounds, by these amino acids, and the preference and the mechanism of yeast and how they, will turn off one. There's a priority, and they put them in there's a group A, group B, group C, group D of the amino acids, and which ones are the easiest for them to use and they use first. And there's quite a bit of amino acids in a malt wort, all malt wort. So unless you mess with this, I'm not sure at what level this would kick in. So if you're doing like a lower gravity wort, would this really matter at all? It may just be more important in higher gravity worts. So we'll have to do some tests on that too. And it may be higher gravity worts, they utilize all the more assimilable amino acids first, and then, you're providing these other amino acids, they'll start to use those, and it'll change the flavor. I mean, we could get, more floral, rose flavors. We get more fruity flavors. We can get umami, character. I think the tryptophan maybe is the one that gives you kind of an umami. I mean, if you were trying to get that umami character in some of the beers, it's kind of tricky. And maybe this is a way that you could. So I think, I buy the amino acids. I'll ship you out mystery powders that you won't know what they are. And then you'll brew these beers, and then I don't know, we'll have to, maybe we'll ship the beers around, all three of us.
Yeah.
And, it's got to be blind triangle, testing and see what we can come up with. And maybe we'll get some other people in on this too. But I
you want to know why I love it?
Yeah.
I love it because I'll have something to blame my shitty beer on.
Oh, I love it because
it's a joke.
It's something nobody's really talking about. I haven't heard anywhere from anybody.
Right.
So if this could be like the next big, who cares about siles? We're doing protein.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that could be really cool.
This is a fascinating topic, and we fully intended to give it a go. It's just we're both so busy, it was very difficult. But now that people have called us up on it and called us out on it, we need to buckle down and just get it done, and at least try.
Following one of the things you said, would we have to push the limits of the yeast to really get a yeast that's maybe only good for 10? I don't know if you can find anything lower, and really push it so it stops and it's done, and it's maybe only use that heavy dose.
Well, and I think it would maybe also be affected by pitching rate, right?
Yeah.
So the less yeast mass you provide, And the more they need to replicate to bud to finish off a given wort, maybe then, there's more cell wall building and more amino acids are needed. And so, maybe more of these other ones are taken in, or maybe if you just overwhelm them with these other amino acids, they go like, hey, there's lots of this stuff around.
Yeah.
That's more readily available than the others. And it may be, that availability has an effect. So there's lots of things to trial here.
I was definitely thinking too, it'd be pretty straightforward, at least with one singular protein. Make a batch, split it. I would think do something pretty plain that any flavor changes would be apparent.
Right.
Just do a control and then do a dose taste test, send them out, do whatever. It'd probably be pretty apparent or not.
All right, let's see here. Bob is asking in the chat. He says, there is a lot of talk these days about how yeast starters are an outdated part of the brewing process. This theory was even said to be endorsed by Chris White himself. What are your thoughts on the subject? Are yeast starters still necessary when using liquid yeast on the homebrew level? Well, I'm seeing Chris tomorrow. We're working on the next yeast book. I will ask him if he said that starters are outdated. I think, it's very interesting to me that a lot of yeast producers, not just White Labs, not just the dry yeast companies, but a lot of them are just very anti making a starter. And I'm not sure why. I think they're concerned that people are going to contaminate the starter. I think that is their thought. They're going to contaminate it, and then they're going to blame it on their yeast that the beer is contaminated. But I've had a lot of beers from a lot of people that make starters, and they tend to be the better beers out there. So I don't know why that is.
Can I posit a theory?
Sure.
So if I'm making my 10-gallon batch and I don't use a starter, I have to buy twice as much yeast.
Right.
But they under recommend as well. You might buy twice as much yeast when you really need 4 times as much yeast.
Right.
And one conversation I have often, Jamil, is like, I didn't use that calculator exactly, and my beer came out fine. Like, okay, it came out fine. Did it come out excellent? You make the same thing next time? Do you have control of exactly what you're doing, or did you just you got a good beer? And there's nothing wrong with good beer, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with good beer, but you never talk about making just good beer. You talk about making the best beer you can make, making the exact same beer over and over.
Having spent a lot of time drinking and dining with, I almost said something else. I'm just, me, I'm always joking. Having spent a lot of time with a lot of these yeast folks, I can tell you that pretty much every one of them, at least the people I deal with, want brewers to make the best beer possible. That's what they're looking for. They're not, I've never heard them go like, well, we really want them to buy more yeast. In fact, the pitching rate calculator, a lot of them were kind of upset because it suggested more yeast than they suggest. Right. Yep. So I think, they don't want people to buy more yeast. They want people to make the best beer possible. I guarantee you that, their tests are showing, great results from the yeast in the quantities that they suggest. The only problem I have with that is, the yeast, and maybe that's changed today, but, back in the day when I had to drive around to homebrew shops and pick up yeast, various homebrew shops, throughout the area, the yeast isn't always 100% fresh. And I've traveled to a lot of homebrew shops around the world, and I can't tell you the number of times I've seen yeast sitting warm, outside a fridge, liquid yeast. Oh yeah, and then dry yeast too. I've seen stores where the dry yeast is just left on the shelves. It's never refrigerated. And so it's not good for the yeast. And because of that, I think a starter is really an important step in validating that you have a good pitch of yeast, that it's healthy, it's ready to go. And, at least I'd like doing like a proofing step to see that the yeast is active.
That's what a smack pack's all about, right?
Right. I will say that definitely White Labs has doubled the amount of yeast, or not doubled. I think
1.5.
They go, 50% more. then it's double what originally in the vials with the on blue cap, they were 50 mil centrifuge tubes. From that, it's double from that. And then they raised it up to, when they were doing the tubes, they increased them from, I think, 75 to 100 billion, and now they're like 150 billion, something like that.
The new next gen is 215.
215.
I really like using them because they're really perfect for making starters, 200 bill starters.
The new next gen is 215.
Yeah, they actually, it's pretty neat. They have the QR code on the back, and you can QR code, and it's got all of the testing they do. They do all the they check for wild yeast, they check for bacteria. They're making sure your vitality is at 99 or 95% plus. The really cool thing I saw too on their social media was, compared to the vial, compared to the first pure pitch, now this one, like you said, they're getting a lot more vitality longer. It's like at 6 months, the pure pitch next generation 2 has like a 94.9% vitality that they're advertising. So for me, I just do starters because, like Travis was saying, I want a number that's custom made for my work. Mm-hmm. And so I believe all the calculators and the models are going to get me closer to that than 1 pouch versus 2 pouch versus 3 pouch.
True.
I will say there are certain manufacturers of yeast who won't even tell you how much yeast is in their pack. They just tell you it's enough to inoculate this level of work. Which
just give me the number and let me decide if it's enough. I can do math. I'm fine.
So following what Michael's saying, following what you were saying, Jamil, it's 95% when Chris White's wonderful employees store it in the fridge. It may not be 95% 6 months later at my homebrew shop. After it's shipped there and it sat on the counter, or maybe it was delivered on a Saturday out in the heat.
It's probably closer to 99%, when they package it, or 100%. And then, like you're saying, 6 months down the road, the thing is, it's still probably enough, because they're pretty resilient. And if it was handled correctly, it's still enough to do, the average strength, beer, and you get good results. But again, you two guys aren't looking for good results. You're looking for the greatest beer, ever made on the planet every time you brew. And so, I mean, that's the goal, right? Otherwise, why bother? Oh, you can have fun with it, But yeah, so I think, a starter is still an important step. I think, Bob, I think you really can bypass a starter in a lot of cases. It depends on, if you're just having fun with brewing, I wouldn't stress about it too much. Now that I'm home brewing again, I'm brewing beer, so I'm just like, well, yeah, here you go. I know it'll be enough. I know it'll be fine. And I'm not too worried about it. The beer gets consumed in like 2-3 hours over at, Matt's pub. And so I'm like, well, whatever, it'll be fine. They won't care. Some of them turn out great. Some of them turn out good. It doesn't bother me at all. Any last thoughts on that?
No, I think that's it for me.
Maybe where Bob got his information from, if you go to Yeastman, where the QR code brings you on the back of the pack, which has been there for quite some time, but it's been more obscure, and now it's very obvious. Yeastman, if you tell it, I've got 1080 work, blah, 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 X gallons, it doesn't tell you starter, it tells you more packs. Now, it's still very conservative.
Right.
It's not Chris White trying to sell you 20 packs.
Nope.
It's like he'll still tell you 1 pack's fine. And I say Chris's calculator. But yeah, so maybe that's why people are saying that even Chris White is no longer telling people that they need to have starters. I don't know. And Jamil's going to grill him.
I would almost say I'd be curious to hear if Chris White even said that. I think it's kind of I heard maybe, so we'll see.
I can imagine hearing him say, with the new packs, starters aren't needed as much. Yeah. But yeah, they asked me my opinion on the calculator. I give them a bunch of input and they implemented every last thing I said. But yeah, it's interesting because if the Lallemand has the no alcohol or low alcohol yeast strain. It only ferments glucose. And so it leaves all the maltose behind. But they don't want to sell it to homebrewers because they're concerned that a homebrewer is going to make a batch that's going to be contaminated, and then, could be botulism, all sorts of things. But I will say this, I trust more homebrewers with handling this than I do a lot of, commercial brewers. I mean, I've seen what people do. I've seen how contaminated yeast is in the commercial sector. So I'm not sure I would trust commercial brewers with that yeast. I would, I mean, that, if that's the concern, that's a concern. I'm actually going to interview a guy from Lowland, and I'll ask him about that, and I'll bring that up and see, because, if you're commercial brewing and you produce something that kills people, it's like, that's really bad. You put that out there in like cans and you kill, a bunch of people. You make a whole bunch of people very sick. It's probably not going to kill anybody, but you can make a bunch of people very sick. That is something huge. There's no protection against that, really. And most of the insurance isn't really going to help you that much. Whereas, you make yourself sick at home, you make you and your partner sick. Well, it's your own fault. Big warning on the pack, something like that. I don't know.
You and your buddies die, we just blame it on the cult action and we'll move on.
I have an idea of maybe why it's so. If a brewery makes a bad beer, the customer is going to blame the brewery. If you make a bad beer using their yeast, you're going to, assuming you don't understand what you did to contribute to that bad beer.
See, this is why Michael's on the show.
And go bad-mouthing them all over town.
You picked it out 100%. If the brewery screws it up, they're the buffer between, the yeast manufacturer and the consumer.
Right.
Oh, I doubt it though. Right? Lawsuits, the class action lawsuit.
Yeah, they always go through for the money. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's going to come down. Yeah.
But it would give you a little bit of a buffer. Whereas, consumer, direct to consumer.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. You kill one or two guys, no big deal. The brewery gets sued. But you kill 100 people, that's when you get the class action going. Okay, you're right.
Let's see. Garth in the chat, he asks, so lads, dry hopping, so many people and so many opinions. What's your process? Ferment, de-rest, chill a little to 60 Fahrenheit, dump yeast from cone, dry hop. After 36 hours, chill to 34 Fahrenheit, dump hops after a day settling. Do you see any issues with that process? Is it worthwhile using metabosulfite at dry hop and purging headspace a number of times with CO2? Anything else? Let me jump right in here. The headspace of your fermenter at the end of fermentation has no oxygen in it. It is completely devoid of oxygen because of fermentation. I think it all sounds fine. The process I implemented at Heretic while I was still there was to dry hop and then to recirculate the entire beer in the hops for about 3 hours, which was a full turn of a 120 barrel fermenter. And then once that was completed, shut off the pump, letting everything settle, and then dropping it. Yeah, we'd drop the yeast, dry hop. Because stirring it up for 3 hours really pretty much extracts everything you want to get out of the hops and leaves behind a lot of the other less desirable things. That's one of the reasons I don't like fermentation hopping. But 36 hours, again, the problem with cones and even, carboy bottoms or a lot of cones, they concentrate everything down. And so you have a very small layer exposed to the beer. And so if it's just sitting on the bottom, it's not really doing anything. Especially after you drop the yeast, you're real tight down on the cone. Your hops are not being exposed. And the only real exposure you get is when you initially put them in and they trickle down to the bottom. So if I had a homebrew conical, I would recirculate the beer until, maybe for an hour or two, and then let it settle. And once it's settled, dump it out and go for packaging. I don't see any need for the metabisulfite. I think, people need to be careful about adding metabisulfite in different, a lot of people, I guess, use it for getting rid of chlorine and chloramines
in your hot liquor ton. Right. Sorry.
Yeah. But, there's already an issue with a lot of beers having too much sulfur to them. And, you don't want to end up with just keeping adding a lot more free sulfur, I would think. But what do I know?
I could ask you so many questions the whole show.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I mean, for me, he basically uses my process, but I mean, and that's kind of out of the new IPA. And then what you've told me, I've actually asked you in person once, way back when. But the only thing I do is because I don't have a pump or any way to anaerobically recirculate the beer, I just purge with CO2 at the dump valve, but I don't have a stone or anything. So it's large bubbles. So I'm just trying to get agitation. I'm not stripping. At least I shouldn't be. And if I am, it's negligible. But that's my way of like, every time I charge, which I'll do 2 to 3 charges depending on the beer style, and then I'll rouse the beer with large bubbles of CO2.
I think,
and that's worked well for me.
I think we should have a poll. Should Michael be stripping?
I mean,
is he rousing enough?
Am I rousing people with my stripping?
Yes.
And then literally you said we have to have a poll. So
right. Then we have a stripper. We should have a stripping poll.
As Michael's rousing.
Yes.
Do you see if people are getting roused?
Is rousing.
So
we really can't say anything intelligent on this without somebody bringing out the infantile humor.
I set myself up. I get no other blame.
So I see Garth's process is a summary of what I think most pros do, or along the lines with a lot of pros do.
Mm-hmm.
There's at least one reason why you're dumping your yeast before you add your hops. You want to say you need that yeast. That's money. Because you often have advised homebrewers to go ahead and get your first dry hop in at least before the beer is finished. Now, that could just be the suspended yeast that's still in there. You could take a yeast dump still, because you don't necessarily want yeast in hops in your yeast dump. He's going very far away to pull a finished beer, yeast out, and then do his first dry hop. He still has some yeast in there.
Yeah, there's always yeast.
Yeah,
and they'll suck up the oxygen.
And I was going with that, sucking up the oxygen, right? So you've got the yeast in there to suck up the oxygen. So maybe he's fretting a little bit over that. And I don't drop hops straight in my 1.5 inch quart conical, because I can't get the hops out of the bottom of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a problem sooner or later. It's going to block it up. I had way more hops than that. You had a 4-inch quart. Jamil went large, right? You can get hops out of that.
Commercial fermenters, even the 120 barrel, they tended to be about 2, 2.5.
Okay, 2.5.
Yeah.
All right.
You had to use some pressure to blast it out. So
I'll say unit tank, 15 psi max, maybe a little bit higher. 30 feet tall. So you got that,
22 feet.
Yeah, you got 7.5 psi from that, plus your whatever compressor of your
yeah. It really wouldn't take a whole lot of pressure.
Get it going.
3-4 psi, and it would come out like Play-Doh factory.
Yeah. I would say too, on his comment. Oh, it's already gone. For purging the headspace, I was thinking after he adds his dry hops, he's worried about, am I letting oxygen into the headspace there? What I used to do is I just had a little CO2 tube running on a real low flow. So I got I'm holding the tube as I pour my hops. I've never had an oxidation problem. I've got this guy, which has a ball lock post, and I'll run slow CO2 through that while I'm filling here. And so it's actually pushing CO2 out as I'm pouring in. So I'm like at a positive pressure, I guess you would say, inside the vessel.
Yeah, even then, a little bit of oxygen.
Yeah.
There's still yeast in there. They're gonna take it up. It's generally not gonna be an issue, but I know people are trying to make the world's greatest beer. The greatest beer the world has ever seen, and so I understand. Every little bit is interesting. Garth also asks, where is Palmer? He wandering around in a fugue state in southern Florida? No
Didn't you
pants,
do
no
it?
shame.
You did a show with him recently, I thought, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I first off, we explained that he got seriously injured in a one of those body suit skydiving things, but
Yeah, the squirrel
that
suit
turned
or
out not to be factual. And then Palmer's doing a technical review or editorial review of some articles for the master brewers,
the MBAA.
MBAA. Yes, thank you.
Can we get some guest subscriptions to that system since we're sitting in for him?
Oh, I wonder, you might be able to. If you're like a university student, you get a really discounted one. I don't think I can get into the Heretic one anymore. Although I don't know that they're using it. Let's see. Garth also asks, recirc how? Peristaltic pump? Unsure about how to do this on the homebrew level. Yeah, I would suggest a peristaltic pump. It needs to be a big enough one that the tubing can handle, the hops and stuff like that. But it wouldn't have to be very big. You could pick one off of eBay and just make sure that the tubing you're using does not allow oxygen permeable. A lot of people like to choose silicone for things they do in brewing, and they don't realize how very oxygen permeable silicone is. You're better off with vinyl for your transfers than you are silicone. You will pick up quite a bit of oxygen in silicone. So
shame of the matter is, silicone's so soft it works great with the pumps.
Yeah,
but you're here advising us that is the wrong material.
Yeah, there's platinum cured silicone, quite expensive, and I've had thousands of dollars of platinum cured silicone prove to be horrible and allow a ton of oxygen in. I swapped it out with plain vinyl and dropped oxygen on our canning line. So you can't. My experience is you can't trust platinum cured silicone to be really actually the right stuff. There's other tubings, but just make sure if you're going to use a peristaltic pump, that's the case. Any pump you use, you want to make sure, it's not going to pull in a lot of oxygen. You don't want to recirculate a ton of oxygen through. So that's one of the dangers doing it homebrew style. But if you can set it up, I think it's definitely worth doing. The difference you get in hop character from that is substantial, I think. James, he says, Travis, give a summary of my low DO rant.
Yeah. The sour goose led James to send me a series of messages. No, I shall not try to summarize James's rant. If you would like to one day invite James on your pedestal here and allow him to rant on Lodo, that's your business, Jamil. I'm not doing it.
All right. We'll do it. I need to take another break. We'll be back right after this.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're answering your questions live. We actually got a fair amount of questions. And Garth has one more. Where's Blickman? Well, Blickman was just on with Palmer. Garth, are you not keeping up? Clearly, you're either not watching live or you're not going back to the archive. Well, actually, it may not be posted yet. No,
that was posted.
It's on. Yeah.
There you go. Probably with Palmer and their G-string briefs in Florida. Probably with Palmer. Yeah, get him to design some homebrew recirculation rig for dry hopping.
What was the new thing you guys,
Garth, is you should email feedback@blickmanengineering.com and tell John that you want him to design something so you could recirculate the beer and explain why that's the trend and everybody's going to start doing it and everyone's talking about it. And I bet you he will make something. He's a clever dude. All right, let's see. Run along. Did not keep up with my breaks. I was enjoying the conversation so much. All right, Steve. Steve writes, let's see. Damn you all. Here I was happily brewing away mediocrely
I read this. Yeah.
And make beer that was good enough. And I'm impressed my dim-witted friends. A fellow brewer turned me on to your show, and now I am second guessing every damn thing I do. What have you done? We just want to help you brew the best beer possible. Bullshit. Now you're all in my head, having me listen to podcasts about frickin' sanitation on my commute to work, and people in traffic think I'm nuts when I laugh while driving. At least I'm in Elk Grove, so everyone here is either a little nuts or inbred. Thanks again, Steve.
I didn't dig at you, Jamil.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I used to live in Elk Grove.
Yeah.
I used to work.
Either you're laughing at him or you're inbred. I'm not sure which, Jamil.
I'm definitely nuts. Inbred? I don't think so.
I guess so. Thanks for clarifying. You're laughing at him. That's cool.
Know. You never know.
I read that. I was wondering where was the question.
Right. No, I think
you have a question, sir.
I think the question I pose to you guys is, does thinking about, every last little detail actually pay off, or is it not worth, is the juice not worth the squeeze? Is there too much squeeze going on in home brewing, or does all that effort actually produce a vastly superior beer? Are you getting more out of that attention to detail than you were before that attention to detail? I mean, how do you compare the beer? Is it minimally better? Is it vastly better? Is it definitely worth the effort?
For me, it's millions of miles better. And I actually have a good homebrew buddy that I talk with about this. Actually, we've talked about it several times, is that really the difference between mediocre beer, bad beer, and some of the best beer that you could get anywhere is, I agree with it, is attention to detail. And if anything homebrewing might do for you as a person, it might help with your attention to detail in other places of your life. So I think I'm looking for new ways to streamline and be faster and be just as accurate and not be overthinking it and get kind of analysis paralysis. But at the same time, I have my marks. I really work hard to hit exactly what I wanted and get exactly what I want from the beer. And that's a lot of attention to detail. So I'm with that opinion.
Yeah, so for me, if you're gifted a Craftsman 2000 piece toolbox, you don't have to use it. You don't have to change your head gasket if you don't want to. You can pay somebody else to do it. But should you want to, you got it. I want to. I want to make my beer better. Well, to be honest, I want to be less depressed when I buy commercial beer sometimes. But I want my stuff to stand up to anything commercial. And I get my Craftsman tool set from fellas like you, Jamil, from books and stuff. From doing it over and over and learning from my own mistakes. I like the Craftsman tool set that I have to make better beer. Mm-hmm. That's a personal choice, though.
Right.
Yeah, my last little throw it in there too is I remember listening to all the Brew Strongs. You've said many a time that you get into homebrewing to make the best beer possible, and you want to make things that you can't get at the store. And I've actually gotten to the point where, I appreciate homebrew from many other people and my own, and I enjoy it more than store-bought stuff. And I think that it's just so much more interesting and delicious and fresh and all these things that go into it. But you got to have that attention to detail.
Mm-hmm. Really does pay off. Sorry for the quick breaks one after the other, but I just didn't pay attention to the time. All right. We're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up with more of your questions right after this.
Back to the two guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're answering lots of live questions. We're catching up on questions that have been asked, like as of last month. We're really doing we're really on top of it lately. So if you have questions for us at Brew Strong, you can email brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com. And the newer questions, I'm on top of them. We're getting to them, and then we mix in some decades old questions because I promised every question would get answered. So there we go. Let's do this one from Lee. It came in June 9th of 2023. Quick enough for you?
Right.
Sort of. I mean, if you need like an immediate answer, this is not the forum for that, but we will try. He says, well, I was just about to cancel the $2 a month that I have donated to the Brewing Network since 2008. But now that Jamil is back, I guess I'm hooked back in. I never went anywhere. It's just, there was a month or two. I was, sitting on the toilet, couldn't be bothered, couldn't get to the phone. I have always enjoyed trying to recreate some of the great lagers I have drank in Bavaria and Bamberg region. In regards to low dissolved oxygen proponents and homebrewing, does the hot side aeration techniques, including adding metabisulfite, matter? FYI, I use a Braumeister that I bought from More Beer. More Beer, an excellent homebrew shop. Probably the best, if you're especially if you're gonna order from the internet. But don't forget to support your local homebrew shop. Even More Beer will tell you that. Local homebrew shops go out of business. There's not going to be any homebrewing. So you keep supporting your local homebrew shop. You find a way to support them. I'm always careful to limit my cold side and post-fermentation exposure to oxygen through standard techniques, but I'm wondering if this hot side effort is worth it. Thanks, Lee. And what do you guys think on hot side aeration?
So I actually went back and listened to your Brew Strong, like I said, with Danforth doing the interview with JP. And it kind of confirmed a lot of things I thought. That does hot side aeration affect beer stability? The answer is the jury's out, but there are these reactions happening that are creating precursors that could cause staling. And then a lot of those things can be fixed with a vigorous, rich, healthy fermentation. I mean, he speaks also about vigorous boiling and like you said, heat loading or things like that. But
thermal loading. I
mean, he said fermentation and then also low DO packaging and temperature control. He gets into a big thing about Arrhenius and how the rate equations and how you have a doubling of staling every 10 degrees Celsius. So if you take care of those things and you concentrate on kind of the mountains versus the molehills, you can really take out a big chunk of that possibility for staling. So that's where I focus all my work is in low DO packaging, temperature control of the packaged beer, and then I really try to do my starters and have super healthy oxygenated wort ready to be fermented.
Ferment vigorously.
Yes,
vigorously. That's a callback to the lovely Daniela.
Oh, yeah.
Early days.
So Michael, that's my end result. And you said something that I think everyone needs to think about. And our gentleman who asked the question, he was talking about the beers of Bavaria.
Yes.
Which there are some lighter beers in Bavaria, but all your Dunkelweizen and stuff like that come from there. And the one thing I've heard that is seemingly significant about Lodo, you can make a lighter beer. But if you don't want to make a lighter beer, you're going to have to add some heat into it to get it back to dark or some other malts. So you're either going to make an entirely different recipe with some darker malts, or you're going to heat stress the piss out of it to get it back to dark again. So if you want to make this pristine Pilsner, maybe Lodo is the trick. And if you make it and you hand it to me, I'll tell you if it's great or not. But if I'm making the average beer in Bavaria, which is not exactly a pristine Pils, I'm not even considering trying to keep the color lighter. That's not my goal. My goal is to make a very good tasting beer that hopefully I can drink it for a while. I mean, you've got certain German styles that you brew in March, you drink in October or September, right? So you want a stable beer. Color is not the biggest issue. I'm not a believer necessarily in that it's a requirement. I'm a believer in that when people tell me they can make a lighter beer, sure. But I make a beer for its taste more than its color,
Right.
Personal opinion.
So one of the things that Budweiser does is they have this kind of a waterfall across the cooling. They have a wall of chilled plate that the beer cascades down. and they've done this for a long time. And I will, you can say all you want about the beers of Budweiser, but you're not going to say that they're, stale or, a lot of DO or whatever.
Or darker style.
Oxidized. Right. So I think, in that episode, Michael, you're referring to, I think Bamforth mentions that possibly.
Yeah, he does.
So,
about Budweiser. And
yeah, I don't think hot side aeration is an issue. As long as you have a good fermentation, good vigorous fermentation, I think that really counters that. The issue is really more, with oxidation and staling, or mainly staling of various kinds in a lot of craft beer, is that we use these ingredients that have had a lot of heat applied to them. The crystal malts and things like that, or darker base malts, have had much more heat applied, and that accelerates staling. And it's one of the reasons that you'll find, beers like that have more of this character tend to stale faster. So I think that's more the issue than hot side aeration. So I really wouldn't worry about hot side aeration, Lee. I think there's, like Michael's saying, there's, just focus on the mountains. Don't worry about the mole hills. And I would say hot side aeration. Yeah, if you can avoid it, great. But it's definitely a molehill in the pantheon of the mixed metaphors of brewing things. So there you go. All right. Did I take 3 breaks yet?
Yeah, I think you took 3 breaks. You took one on time, one late, and then one shortly after.
Usually I track these things, but today I was feeling. All right. I'll tell you what, because we're supposed to keep these shows to an hour, so they work on somebody's commute or a little bit overtime. So what I'm going to do is end the show here. If you are listening live, please stay tuned. Get your questions ready. You can ask them in the comments section. If you look on Facebook and you're listening on Facebook, there's a comments button there. You can click on that, our comments link, and that'll take you into the comments, so you can see questions everybody else has asked or comments they've made, and you can ask yours, and we will try to get to them live as we do the shows. We're going to do another show right after this. So if you're listening live, you get to continue on with us. And if you're listening on the podcast, it's going to be, 2 weeks or so till the next one, something like that. I don't know. But in the meantime, what I want you to do is, if you have equipment ideas, if there's a piece of equipment that you're like, I'd love to see this made. Why isn't this made? This is a great idea. Email feedback@blickmanengineering.com and tell them. Just say, hey, John, I got this idea for a product I want you to do, or something like that. Or I think this would be a great idea. If anybody can make it, he can. And, or, just tell him how much you appreciate that he has paid for this show, so you don't have to, for the last 16 years or however long it's been. Someday I'm going to figure out how long it's been. I know I've been talking for more than 1,000 hours. So yeah, there you go. So if you have questions, that you want us to answer, send them in to brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com. I get all those. I still have every single one of them that was ever sent to us. And that way we're hitting the new ones first now and getting through them, and then mixing in some older ones. So if you send your question in, we will get to it. It might take a couple of months. So it's not like my house is on fire. What do I do? Don't send us those questions.
Yeah,
right? Do that. But we're happy to help in any way we can.
5 minutes. 5 minutes. I have to pitch in 5 minutes, really quick. How much?
It's like I'm brewing tomorrow. We do get some questions. I'm brewing tomorrow. And what should I do? I'm just like, I'm like, man, it's been 13 years since this question was asked.
Hope the brew day went well.
And I'm like, yeah, I feel bad, but we are going to answer all those questions. So we do, and hopefully people aren't too disappointed with us for that. All right. I guess that's it for this show. Like I said, stay tuned if you're listening live. We will get that out there. And if you want to know when the shows are coming live, I post them to my social media. Jay Zanishev on Instagram, Mr. Malty on Twitter, and Jay Zanishev on Facebook. Something like that. I don't know. These younger people will tell you. All right.
You're not threading it yet.
Until
You're not
then,
threading it out there.
Brew strong.
Brew strong.